father and brother of the Tel Aviv gunman are released to house arrest 2 days after perpetrator Nashat Milhim is killed in a shootout and as new details emerge of the week-long manhunt. Moscow marks 100 days of fighting in Syria amid allegations one of its airstrikes killed dozens in a rebel-held town. This as an aid convoy, which was due to reach besieged Madaya, is delayed at the last minute. And Turkish forces kill more than 30 Kurdish militants in one of the bloodiest weekends since a ceasefire between Ankara and the PKK collapsed in July.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the News Today. The father and brother of Tel Aviv shooting perpetrator Nashat Milhim were released to house arrest today after they were detained on suspicion of being accomplices to the gunman. This comes as new details emerge of the week-long investigation which led security forces to the northern Israeli city of Arara, where Milhim was found and killed. I-24 News correspondent Eli Ochenberg has the story.
It took a full week for the Israeli security forces to get their hands on Nashat Milhim, the Arab Israeli who murdered 3 people in Tel Aviv on New Year's Day. The lengthy manhunt involving hundreds of soldiers and policemen, which spread panic throughout the country, ended in Milhim's hometown of Arara in northern Israel.
We end 8 days of attrition, arrests, raids, media pressure indicating Nashat was indeed hiding here, which took a huge toll on everyone here, fearing he might act again. We didn't want to see the affair end with his killing. First, because Nashat was a sick man, and we also wanted to hear from him what were his motives for carrying out the attack.
And the motives are indeed a huge part of this affair. The fact Milhim was an Arab Israeli with full citizenship has raised a heated debate over the question of dual loyalty in the Arab sector in Israel.
Anyone with eyes in his head knows there are large gaps between the Israeli Arab and Jewish public, resource gaps and gaps in law enforcement, gaps and discrepancies in right obligations. These gaps formed during decades, and it's the time to make a major national effort to reduce them.
Meanwhile, a Haifa court ordered the release of Milhim's father and brother after they were arrested last week on suspicion of aiding Nashat after the fatal shooting. There are still many loose ends on the before and after of Milhim's attack. But perhaps the more difficult questions are the ones that were raised during the 7-day manhunt, such as the police capabilities, the vision of both the Israeli and the Arab Israeli leaderships, and social gaps and divisions. It remains to be seen if any of these questions will be answered before the next national crisis.
And with me right now here in the studio, Amir Oren, defense and government analyst for Haaretz Daily newspaper. Good evening.
Evening, Lucy.
And also Gonen Ben Yitzchak, former Shin Bet agent. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. I will start with you, Amir. The latest, let's say, things that we're revealing on this case are surprising or not surprising so much?
Well, they're embarrassing because, as you remember, over the last 8 or 9 days, Israeli public opinion has shifted. First, it was bewildered. Where is Nashat Milhim? Then, all of a sudden, it turned out that the Shin Bet and police were closing in on him, found him, and killed him. So everybody was so happy,
living
yes,
happily
course.
Ever after.
And then it turned out that they could have and should have found him much earlier. And perhaps part of the explanation is that the police has been reorganized over the last 4 or 5 years. The police district, which used to be the northern district, has been split into 2, the coastal district and the northern district. Now, rather than keep all of the Arab towns and villages under one single district, with one single authority and some knowledge base, it was split, and the Wadi Ara area was given to the Haifa and Hadera district, the coastal area. Apparently, and there was between the district commander, who is no longer there, he is missing, and the police stations, there was no other chain, no other link in the chain. Apparently, this created havoc. And the fact that Milchem was there for 5 days, people knowing about him, he went out for cigarettes. He smoked a certain brand of cigarettes. Even if there was surveillance on the groceries there, for whoever bought this sort of cigarette, this brand, they would have found him.
I wanted to, I saw one of the reports, Gonen, on Friday on Israeli Media Channel 2, and, they spoke about the fact who he was, from which family he came, and everybody were talking about the fact that his family was called the family who was cooperating with the Shabak. And it was with the Shin Bet. And, it was kind of maybe obvious to start looking at his own house. If everybody's pointing towards this house, if everybody's pointing towards this family who is cooperating with the Shabak, how come nobody's looking at the family's house?
Of course, I need to say I don't know all the details about this event, but I do know, and this is not the first time I say it even in this studio, that one problem is that the attention shifted even within the Shin Bet, from the human intelligence into other means of intelligence, including the SIGINT and so on. So when you don't have eyes and ears on the ground, it's a problem. And I think
that was one of the worries when the Shin Bet said after the northern branch of the Islamic movement was taking out, that was part of the reasons that the Shin Bet said this is not a good step for Israeli intelligence in the first place.
I don't know, but maybe because they knew that it's a problem, and also, of course, because today when youngsters within those villages, their movement is no longer illegal, it's really inspired them to go into terrorism. Adding to that, all the Daesh idea, the fact that people are sitting on Facebook, Twitter, and all the social media, and they get these ideas, and we see what happens. And I think that the Shin Bet needs go one step back into human, and one step forward into going deeper into the web.
It's amazing what you're saying, because the father at the same day came out to the media and said one of this. I didn't notice this only on Saturday. He said, I am working in the system for a long time now. I know what is going on. I am calling my son to come back. So working in the system, these phrases are yes, phrases that certain people are using them, yes, and only people who are working in the system can use the word system, basically.
But he was depicted as a volunteer with the police. There was a very thin cover.
A volunteer in the police that has weapon in his own house.
But and
he gave like a big clue to all the security services. Come and look here. Maybe he is around.
But and Gonen knows it much more than the two of us. Sometimes even the agent you run, sometimes even your source turns against you for various reasons. Pressure is being brought to bear on him. Perhaps someone in his family is being abducted and held at the threat of death. And even when Gonen goes to meet his agent, one he has run for several years, one he trusts, all of a sudden he could pull a gun on him.
There are some movies about that.
You never know. It's a very dangerous business. And the fact that his father was part of the system does not mean that any son who might rebel against his father wouldn't take his weapon.
What are the chances that that was maybe one of the scenarios, that basically the son rebelled on his father's, let's say, daily job routine or daily system?
Well, it could happen. Again, I don't know the details, but we need to think about this father that knows what are the sequences of what his son did, and he knows that the life of his son are threatened right now by the Secret Service or the Israeli police, and he needs to choose between the Israeli law and his son, and I think this is a terrible decision and a terrible choice. We never, he was released today, meaning that he didn't help his son. I guess that if during his interrogation within the Shin Bet, they would found that he helped his son, he would be kept in prison.
From your point of view, and I'm finishing with that, what are the chances that the details, the actual details, the real details of this specific story will be out at the end of the road?
I think that truth has some kind of nature to come out, and it will come out, but this goes back to Amir. I think Amir has the
if we won't have any gag order on it.
In 3 weeks' time, some details, perhaps personal details having to do not only with him but with others involved in the case, will come out.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Thank you. In Syria, the death toll from an airstrike on the rebel-held town of Murat el-Numanon has reportedly surpassed 50. The Syrian Observatory of Human Rights said that Russian jets carried out the strike as Moscow marks 100 days of intervention in the country. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapiro has more.
The crisis in Syria continues to intensify with hopes of new talks underway. UN Special Envoy to Syria Staffan de Mistura said Sunday he insists on holding the Syrian talks in Geneva on January 25th. De Mistura met Syrian Foreign Minister Walid Mualem Saturday. Mualem said his country is ready to take part in the upcoming meeting, but also asked for a list of groups that will be classified as terrorist organizations.
And after this, I will continue my trip also to Tehran. So it's premature to make any comments.
At least 57 people died Saturday as an airstrike hit a courthouse and a prison in the rebel-held town of Marat el-Numan. Most of the casualties were prisoners held by the extremist jihadist group the Al-Nusra Front. It was not clear whether the airstrikes were carried out by Syrian or Russian forces. Meanwhile, evidence of an increasing famine in the southern Syrian city of Madaya continues to mount. Since July 2015, the town was reportedly besieged by President Bashar al-Assad's forces and the Shiite group Hezbollah. The UN is about to enter the besieged town in the coming days after reaching an agreement with the Syrian government. The aid distribution was supposed to start Sunday and was postponed for logistical reasons.
Madaya is one of many besieged areas inside Syria. Around about 400,000 people are in besieged areas. Overall, if you look at the population that's hard to reach in Syria, that extends upwards to almost 4.5 million people across the country.
At the beginning of 2016, the future doesn't look too bright in Syria, a country torn between different political and ethnic factions. It has also become the focus of a geopolitical struggle alongside Yemen and Afghanistan as Russia enters the 100th day of its aerial campaign and months after the US coalition began its own campaign. With so many factions in this puzzle, the road to full reconciliation seems still long and difficult.
And with me right now is Ali Waqid, Senior Middle East Analyst for I-24 News. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Ali, let's start understanding. Maybe Russia will realize now that it's in over its heads. Maybe they got into the mud a little bit too deep than they intended.
I'm not sure, Lucy, how many times the international community said that it will intervene in Syria because of humanitarian issue, the chemical attacks, and we did not see. It is true that in the case of the chemical attack, there was a very significant process that ended with the evacuation of the chemical weapons from Syria. But I think the international community, above all, is very indifferent for what is happening in Syria. The focus is on the Islamic State and on the equilibrium of power between Bashar Assad and the rebels and the interest of the superpower and of the regional power, Iran and Saudi Arabia. This is the most important thing for the international community. This is why, with all the pain we are seeing, and I saw your face seeing these pictures, very tough, but these are not the first tough pictures that we saw from Syria. Now, Madaya is the trend that everybody is talking about. I hope that they will try to introduce food and medicines to the city, but this will not solve. There are many Madayas in Syria. The Yarmouk refugee camp is still a tragedy, and many other places. There is a need for a whole solution. Local tactical solution will not change the situation that in Syria still everybody is killing everybody, and those who pay the price are the innocents.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the hypocrisy of the world. We can say a lot about the hypocrisy of the world. We can say a lot about the hypocrisy of the West. But let's talk a little bit about the hypocrisy of the Arab world. Where is the Arab world watching these images, seeing these kids and people starving to death, not even being killed from bombardments, not even being killed from chemical weapons, just being killed from hunger? Where is the Arab world except being in wars among themselves like Saudi Arabia and Iran?
The Arab world positioned itself very clear, Lucy. I'm not sure that the Arab world that is condemning the attitude of the regime in sieging the city of Madaya and elsewhere want to see this problem solved, because as long as the siege will be maintained, as long there will be pictures as these infiltrated from the city, they will use it, one, to attack the regime and to say that the people of Madaya are being sieged because of them being Sunnis, and they are besieged by Shiite militias and by the regime in order to prove, to emphasize the sectarian nature of the regime. This is why they are condemning, but I'm not sure that they are taking the measures in order to try to find a solution, at least not a lasting solution for the city and the other city. Lucy, Madaya is not alone. Madaya is not a unique case in Syria. And in the coming and more we are going deep into winter, we are going to see many Madayas in Syria.
Let's join to this conversation. Aboud Dandashi, a freelance journalist in Istanbul. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, good evening.
So, Mr. Dandashi, we're talking, maybe you heard us talking about the hypocrisy of the Arab world and talking about the many Madayas that probably we will see after the coming winter. I'm trying to ask myself, when you don't have a plan, and we talked a lot about the lack of plan that the world has, that the Western world has, that the United States has, and that Russia has. And yet, we are seeing these images coming from Syria after airstrikes from Russia. There is no concrete war plan or understanding that this war is a sectarian war, and this war won't be solved if maybe religious people won't get into the middle and try to solve it.
Well, I don't want to predict what course the Syrian war is going to take. You have too many regional players who are involved right now, each trying to push it in a separate direction. But the response of the Arab world towards events in Syria has been absolutely appalling. Right now, the Gulf states are more concerned with Yemen right now. They see that as more of a direct threat to them than what's going on in Syria. Madaya is only a few kilometers away from the Lebanese border. The Lebanese government is pretty much beholden to Hezbollah at this point. They cannot do anything in direct challenge to Hezbollah's interests. It's quite appalling right now. It's amazing that as tragic as the history of the region has been, Syria has somehow made it even worse. And it is an epic mess. And there has not been a plan or response equal to what we've been seeing.
I'm trying to think with you, what can be the solution for this now? Seeing these images of people starving to death, this is something that I don't understand how people can accept this, how people can actually go to sleep, but maybe this is the nature of the human being. But what is something that can be done if you were, let's say, in the negotiation table? What can be done to start and solve this?
Well, this is a regime that has thumbed its nose at normal human decency time and time again, not gotten away with it. Since 2013, the regime of Bashar al-Assad has known that any so-called red lines or statements of concern, or statements of condemnations can just be ignored. They have the full backing of Vladimir Putin and the Ayatollahs in Iran to do pretty much what they want. If they want to starve people, if they want to gas them with chemical weapons, the rest of the world are not going to hold them accountable, which is why they feel emboldened to use these kind of barbaric tactics that they are.
Yes, Abu Dandashi, thank you very much for this. Thank you. And let's stay in the same dispute. The ongoing feud between Riyadh and Tehran has split the region along sectarian lines, like we're seeing. This holds true in the almost uniformly Sunni Palestinian Authority, which has publicly sided with Saudi Arabia. But there is another reason at play. Ramallah remains deeply at odds with Hamas in Gaza, which receives financial and military support from Iran. And joining us right now to discuss this is I-24 News correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasim, who is in the West Bank in Ramallah. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Mohammed, you know, we never maybe spoke about this fact, about the fact that the Palestinians, the majority of the Palestinians, are Sunni, and the Arab world and the wars in the Arab world and the Muslim wars are sectarian, are between Shiite and Sunni. And we are seeing that Hamas, that all the terror organizations are receiving money from the biggest enemies to the Sunnis in the Arab world. How it's working exactly?
Well, Lucy, as you can see, there is really no friends in politics. Hamas is friends with Iran because Iran supplies it with arms, supports it with money, and supports its control of the Gaza Strip. And this is one of the major reasons why the Palestinian Authority and officials within the authority came out immediately after Saudi Arabia announced it's cutting the diplomatic relationships with Iran in support of absolute support with Saudi Arabia. Also, others say that the Palestinian Authority felt compelled to support Saudi Arabia because it's one of the major financial contributor to the Palestinian Authority, and that the Palestinian Authority is coming on some major decisions to make about its security relationship with Israel, which may cut off its financial money from Israel, and it's going to rely on Saudi Arabia. I have here with me Mr. Ashraf Al-Ajrami, a former minister at the Palestinian Authority. Good evening, Mr. Ashraf. Why do you think that the Palestinian Authority chose to back Saudi Arabia in this decision?
I think it is a very bad decision of the PLO or Palestinian leadership, because we must prevent to be one of the political axes in this area, especially because we must keep a good relationship with all parties. Now there is a conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and within also the religious groups here and there, and the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian issue must be careful to be involved in any of these axes.
Thank you. As you can see, Lucy, there is major differences within the Palestinian street, saying that some supports the Palestinian Authority decision, but others definitely are opposed to it. Back to you in studio.
Yes, Mohammed Al-Qasim, thank you very much for this. Ali, let's talk a little bit about that. You know, with all the sit-ups that you've been here and with all the discussions that we were here, we never mentioned this, that the Sunnis in the Gaza Strip are receiving money from the same people who are assisting in the killing of maybe Palestinians in Syria and in refugees camps.
Let's try to arrange things, Lucy. In the last almost 2 years, Hamas did not receive Iran money because Iran sanctioned Hamas. Because Iran sanctioned Hamas for its support to the rebels in Syria. The hardcore of Hamas leadership and Hamas members were supporting the rebels because it was obvious from the very beginning that there is a sectarian background to the conflict in Syria. This is why most of Hamas members supported the rebels. And by the way, Iran and the Syrian regime accused Hamas that they brought their experience in digging tunnels, some tunnels that killed Iranian and Syrian soldier. But Iran play politics, and they know that they need Hamas. And when Hamas were underneath, and when Hamas lost most of its financial support, especially after the campaign of the Egyptian soldiers on the borders, Iran turned back to Hamas, accepting Hamas, begging to renew Iranian support, and started financing not Hamas government, but Hamas military wing and the Hamas movement. And this is why we are seeing Hamas presenting the condolences for all the leaders of Hezbollah, the Revolutionary Guard, and the regime who were killed. But the Iranians decided that they will create an organization that will be absolutely loyal to them, and they created the Sabirin organization, a semi-Shiite organization that will act in the Gaza Strip, who are accused now of not only being the military branch of Iran, but an organization that want to spread the Shiite ideology, the Shiite theology within the majority of the population in the Gaza Strip, who 100% of this population is Sunnite, as you mentioned, Lucy, as all the Palestinians, as also most of the people, even all the Muslims in Israel.
Hypocrisy at its best. We spoke about the Western world. Let's not start talking about our world. Ali Waka, thank you very much for this. Turkish security forces killed dozens of Kurdish militants in the rest of southeast of the country over the weekend, one of the bloodiest two-day periods since a two-year ceasefire between Ankara and PKK militants ended in July. Tamara Ziv has more.
Dozens of Kurdish militants were killed in one of the bloodiest weekends since the 3 decades-old conflict between the Turkish state and Kurdistan Workers' Party reignited last July, disabling a peace process launched by Ankara and the jailed leader of the PKK in late 2012. Turkish security forces said 16 rebels were killed on Saturday in the towns of Cizre and Silopi, near the Syrian and Iraqi borders, and another 4 were killed in the historic Sur district of the region's largest city, Bakir. They also said a total of 448 militants had been killed in those 3 areas since they were placed under round-the-clock curfew and security operations were launched last month. According to the armed forces, police killed a further 12 PKK members after finding them in a house in the southeastern city of Van overnight. 1 police officer died and 2 others were wounded in the operation. The conflicts over the past 4 weeks have not only cost the lives of the people, but also cost local businesses.
The conflict has affected 95% of our business. We couldn't open our shop for 32 days because of the curfew, and because of this, our losses are very big. We hear gunshots. We have gotten used to it.
At the moment, the hotels are almost empty. They have trouble finding clients. Aircrafts are empty too. You can find a seat at any time. It's affecting shopkeepers, everybody.
The autonomy-seeking PKK took up arms in 1984, and more than 40,000 people, mainly Kurds, have been killed in the violence. The PKK is designated a terrorist group by Turkey, the United States, and the European Union.
We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and we'll be back.